Today, I want to share something simple, ancient, and deeply powerful. Debt is rarely just a number on paper. It is a weight that settles quietly into the mind and slowly reshapes how a person thinks, feels, and reacts to life. Long before it shows up as unpaid bills or mounting interest, debt begins as pressure, pressure to survive, pressure to keep up, pressure to fix everything immediately. This pressure creates fear, and fear creates contraction. When the mind is contracted, every decision is rushed, every opportunity looks threatening, and every expense feels heavier than it truly is. That is why debt continues even when effort increases. The problem is not always a lack of work or intelligence, but an inner state that has become misaligned. Ancient wisdom understood this long before modern finance existed. It taught that money flows best where there is order, calm, and trust. When anxiety dominates the inner world, money mirrors that instability. It comes in quickly and leaves even faster, or it avoids the situation entirely. This is not punishment, and it is not bad luck. It is a reflection. Debt persists because the inner environment has become noisy, fearful, and reactive. The psalm is powerful because it does not address the symptom first. It addresses the source. Reading a psalm once a day interrupts the cycle of pressure. It creates a daily moment where the nervous system slows down and the mind steps out of survival mode. In that moment, the body is no longer flooded with urgency, breath deepens, thoughts soften, the constant internal voice saying "I'm behind" or "I'm running out" loses its grip. This shift may seem subtle, but it is foundational. A calm mind makes better decisions. A calm heart recognizes opportunities instead of panicking past them. A calm inner state sends a different signal into the world. Debt feeds on panic. Panic leads to impulsive spending, poor agreements, desperate choices, and short-term thinking. It also leads to shame, and shame isolates. Isolated people stop asking the right questions, stop seeing clearly, and stop trusting their own judgment. The psalm gently dissolves this shame by reminding the reader that they are not alone, not forgotten, and not permanently stuck. It restores dignity, and dignity is essential for financial recovery. A person who feels grounded and worthy handles money differently than someone who feels hunted by it. The reason the psalm is read only once a day is intentional. Overuse turns prayer into noise. Noise does not heal pressure, it increases it. One intentional reading teaches restraint, patience, and trust. It says, "I am not trying to force my way out of this. I am allowing order to return." This alone changes the internal relationship with money. Instead of seeing it as an enemy or a savior, money becomes a tool against, something that can be managed rather than feared. As this internal pressure eases, something practical begins to happen. The mind becomes clearer. People start noticing patterns they missed before, subscriptions that no longer serve them, habits driven by stress rather than need, opportunities they were too anxious to pursue. Ideas surface naturally without strain. Conversations change. Even body language shifts, making interactions more confident and grounded. These are not mystical side effects. They are natural outcomes of reduced internal chaos. Money responds to clarity. When a person is no longer desperate, they negotiate better, plan more wisely, and wait instead of reacting. Unexpected solutions often appear during this phase, not because money is being forced to return, but because resistance has been removed. A delayed payment arrives. A forgotten refund is discovered. A new income path becomes obvious. Sometimes the biggest relief comes not as extra money, but as reduced pressure, lower expenses, simpler needs, or a clearer plan. Relief itself is a form of abundance. It is important to understand that this process does not eliminate responsibility. The psalm is not an excuse to avoid action. Instead, it prepares the inner ground so that action becomes effective. Planting seeds in chaotic soil produces little fruit. When the soil is calm, consistent effort yields results. This is why many people work hard for years without progress, while others experience steady improvement with less strain. The difference is not effort alone, it is alignment. Another hidden benefit of easing spiritual and emotional pressure is patience. Debt creates urgency, and urgency makes people expect instant results. When those results do not appear, discouragement sets in, and many abandon the very practices that were helping them. The psalm teaches quiet consistency. It trains the mind to trust process over panic. This patience allows changes to compound slowly but powerfully, creating stability instead of short-lived relief. Over time, the person who reads the psalm daily begins to change in ways that go beyond finances. Sleep improves, relationships soften, decision-making becomes less reactive. These changes may seem unrelated to money, but they are deeply connected. A regulated nervous system supports long-term thinking. Long-term thinking is essential for escaping debt permanently, not temporarily. In the end, debt loses its grip not because money suddenly appears, but because the inner conditions that sustain the debt no longer exist. Fear loosens, shame dissolves, clarity returns. From that place, money can flow, stay, and grow. The psalm is not a shortcut, it is a reset. It restores order where pressure once ruled. The conclusion is simple but profound. Debt cannot survive where inner stability is maintained. By reading the psalm once a day with sincerity, a person stops fighting their situation and starts transforming it from the inside out. When the pressure lifts within, the outer world begins to reorganize naturally. What once felt heavy becomes manageable. What once felt blocked begins to move, and money, no longer pushed away by fear, finds its way back through paths that only clarity and calm can reveal. Repeating something endlessly does not always make it stronger. Sometimes it makes it weaker. In the realm of faith, mindset, and inner alignment, intention matters more than volume. This is especially true when it comes to prayer, psalms, or any spiritual practice connected to money and relief from debt. Reading a psalm once a day is not a limitation, it is a discipline. It draws a clear line between alignment and desperation, and that distinction changes everything. Desperation carries a very specific energy. It is loud, rushed, and fearful. It says, "I need this now or everything will collapse." When someone reads a psalm over and over again out of panic, the underlying message being sent, internally and spiritually, is not trust but anxiety. Even though the words are holy and meaningful, the emotional state behind them is chaotic. Chaos does not create stability. It multiplies uncertainty. This is why many people pray constantly yet remain stuck. They are reinforcing fear instead of dissolving it. Reading a psalm once a day does the opposite. It establishes rhythm instead of urgency. It teaches the nervous system that there is no emergency in this moment. There is time, there is order, there is space to breathe. This daily rhythm becomes an anchor, something stable in a life that may otherwise feel financially unstable. Stability is the foundation of alignment, and alignment is what allows change to last. Alignment begins when the mind stops racing. When prayer is limited to once a day, the rest of the day is not consumed by checking, begging, or watching for signs. The mind is freed to function. It can focus on work, planning, learning, and observing opportunities. Ironically, this space is where solutions often emerge. When people stop obsessing over money every hour, they start noticing it in healthier ways. They see patterns, they recognize habits, they make choices that support growth rather than survival. Desperation also distorts perception. A desperate mind misreads situations. It says yes when it should say no. It borrows when it should pause. It spends to relieve stress instead of addressing the cause. Repeating a psalm all day long while remaining in this state does not correct the distortion. It coexists with it. One intentional reading, however, creates a clear boundary. It says, "This is my moment of surrender. The rest of the day, I will live responsibly, calmly, and consciously." This approach builds trust, not just spiritual trust, but self-trust. When someone commits to reading once a day and then lets go, they are practicing restraint. Restraint is powerful. It is the opposite of lack. Lack says, "I must grab more now." Restraint says, "I trust that what is meant for me will not disappear." This mindset alone changes how a person relates to money. They stop clinging to it, fearing it, or chasing it blindly. Instead, they begin to respect it. Respect attracts stability. Money does not stay where it is treated as an emergency tool or an emotional escape. It stays where it is handled with calm intention. Reading once a day reinforces this calm. It trains the mind to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing. Over time, this tolerance grows into confidence. Confidence leads to better decisions, and better decisions gradually dissolve debt. Another hidden danger of excessive repetition is disappointment. When people pray repeatedly throughout the day, they often expect immediate visible results. When those results do not appear, frustration grows, doubt creeps in. The practice is abandoned or worse, blamed. Reading once a day removes the constant expectation loop. It allows faith to work quietly, without being monitored every hour. Quiet processes are often the most effective ones. Alignment also requires presence. When a psalm is read once a day, it is more likely to be read slowly with attention. The words are felt instead of rushed. Meaning sinks in. Presence transforms reading into experience. Experience reshapes belief. Belief reshapes behavior. This chain reaction cannot happen when the practice becomes mechanical or compulsive. As days pass, the person may notice subtle changes. They feel less reactive when thinking about bills. They stop comparing themselves to others. They experience moments of clarity instead of constant overwhelm. These shifts may not look like money at first, but they are prerequisites for it. A regulated inner world creates a regulated financial life. Alignment is not about forcing outcomes, it is about becoming congruent with them. When someone reads once a day and then lives the rest of the day without panic, they are embodying the state they wish to reach. They are practicing being someone who is no longer controlled by debt. This practice is far more powerful than frantic repetition because it changes identity, not just circumstance. Over time, this identity shift becomes visible in practical ways. Spending becomes intentional, earning becomes purposeful. Opportunities are evaluated instead of grabbed. The person begins to feel like they are moving forward, even before the numbers fully reflect it. This forward motion builds momentum, and momentum is what eventually breaks financial stagnation. The conclusion is this: once a day is not too little. It is exactly enough. It is enough to restore calm, enough to build trust, enough to replace desperation with alignment. When prayer becomes a steady anchor instead of a frantic reaction, the inner world reorganizes. And when the inner world is organized, the outer world follows. Debt loses its power not when money is chased, but when fear is released. By choosing alignment over desperation, a person creates the conditions where money can return, remain, and grow, naturally, steadily, and without force. Most people believe that if money is going to return to their life, it must arrive in a single obvious form: a payment, a raise, a sudden deposit, or a large opportunity that instantly changes everything. This belief is understandable, but it is also limiting. When the mind becomes fixed on one narrow image of financial relief, it overlooks the many quiet ways abundance actually moves. One of the most important truths hidden within this teaching is that money rarely returns in a straight line. It returns through unexpected channels, subtle shifts, and indirect openings that only become visible once pressure and desperation have been removed. When a person is overwhelmed by debt, their attention narrows. Stress forces the brain into survival mode, where it focuses only on immediate threats. In this state, creativity shuts down, curiosity disappears. The mind becomes rigid, scanning constantly for danger rather than possibility. Even when opportunities appear, they often go unnoticed or are dismissed too quickly. This is not a flaw in character, it is a biological response to pressure. The psalm works by calming this internal state, widening perception so that new pathways can be seen. Once the inner tension begins to ease, awareness expands. People start noticing things they previously ignored, a skill they undervalued, a connection they never followed up on, a recurring expense that can be removed without pain, or a small idea that could grow into something meaningful. These are not dramatic miracles, but they are real and practical forms of return. Money often comes back first as insight, not income. Insight changes behavior, and behavior changes results. Unexpected channels do not always look like blessings at first. Sometimes they appear as interruptions. A delay forces someone to rethink a plan. A rejection pushes them toward a better option. An uncomfortable conversation leads to clarity. In a calm state, these experiences are processed with wisdom instead of frustration. In a stressed state, they are experienced as setbacks. The difference is not the event itself, but the internal condition of the person experiencing it. When the psalm is read daily with sincerity, it gradually rewires the relationship with uncertainty. Instead of fearing the unknown, the person becomes more open to it. This openness is essential, because many financial breakthroughs come from places that cannot be predicted. A chance meeting, a casual comment, a forgotten account, a new need in the market. These things are easy to miss when the mind is loud and anxious. They are easier to recognize when the mind is quiet and receptive. Money also returns through relief. Sometimes the first sign of improvement is not more income, but less pressure. A bill is reduced. An expense disappears. A payment plan becomes manageable. This kind of return is often underestimated, yet it is powerful. Reducing outflow can be just as transformative as increasing inflow. Relief creates breathing room, and breathing room creates strategy. Strategy leads to long-term change. Another unexpected channel is confidence. When internal alignment improves, posture changes, tone of voice changes, and decision-making becomes firmer. People respond differently to someone who is grounded. Employers, clients, and partners sense clarity and stability. Trust increases. Opportunities that were previously unavailable suddenly open, not because the world changed, but because the person did. Confidence itself is a form of currency, and it compounds quickly when nurtured. It is also important to understand that money returns in stages. Rarely does everything resolve at once. More often, there is a sequence: first clarity, then relief, then opportunity, then growth. Each stage prepares the ground for the next. Skipping stages creates instability. The psalm supports this natural progression by slowing the mind and allowing each phase to unfold without force. Unexpected channels require patience. They do not obey rigid timelines. This is difficult for someone under financial pressure, but it is essential. Impatience closes doors. It pushes people to abandon good paths too early or accept poor ones out of fear. Patience, on the other hand, allows time for alignment to deepen and for opportunities to mature. Patience is not passive, it is attentive. It watches without panic and acts without rushing. As the person becomes more aligned, they also become more discerning. Not every opportunity is taken. Not every offer is accepted. This selectiveness is a sign of growth, not limitation. It protects against repeating old patterns that led to debt in the first place. Money that returns through wisdom stays longer than money that arrives through urgency. Over time, these unexpected channels begin to form a new pattern. What once felt chaotic becomes coherent. Finances start to make sense. Decisions feel intentional instead of reactive. The person realizes that they are no longer just surviving, they are rebuilding. This realization itself is empowering. and empowerment fuels consistency. The conclusion is that money does not need to be forced when alignment is restored. It moves naturally toward clarity, stability, and openness. By reading the psalm once a day, a person quiets the internal noise that blocked these channels from view. In that quiet, new paths emerge. Some bring income, some bring relief, some bring insight, but all move the person closer to balance. When balance returns, money follows in forms that are often better, more sustainable, and more meaningful than anything that could have been forced. Gratitude is often misunderstood as a polite response to good circumstances, something reserved for moments when life is already going well. In truth, gratitude is not a reaction, it is a signal. It communicates to the mind, the body, and the surrounding world that there is enough stability to pause, acknowledge, and trust. When finances are strained and debt feels overwhelming, gratitude can feel unnatural or even dishonest. Yet, this is precisely when it becomes most powerful. Panic blocks what gratitude unlocks, and the difference between the two determines whether financial pressure tightens or begins to loosen. When someone is consumed by worry about money, their inner dialogue is dominated by lack. Every thought revolves around what is missing, what might go wrong, and how close everything feels to collapse. This constant mental strain keeps the nervous system in a heightened state of alert. In this state, the brain is not designed to create, plan, or innovate. It is designed only to survive. Gratitude interrupts this cycle. It gently shifts attention from threat to presence, from fear to acknowledgement. Even a small moment of gratitude tells the nervous system that it is safe to slow down. This shift is not symbolic, it is physiological. A calmer nervous system improves focus, memory, and decision-making. These functions are essential for handling money wisely. When panic dominates, people make choices that provide short-term relief but long-term damage. They spend to soothe stress, agree to unfavorable terms, or avoid facing reality altogether. Gratitude creates enough inner space to choose differently. It does not deny the problem, it stabilizes the person facing it. The psalm reinforces this shift by grounding the reader in recognition rather than demand. Instead of saying, "I lack," the heart begins to say, "I am supported even here." This internal message changes how the mind interprets challenges. Problems become manageable instead of overwhelming. Debt becomes a situation to resolve, not a verdict on personal worth. This distinction matters deeply. Shame and fear push money away. Self-respect and steadiness invite order. Gratitude also restores perspective. Under financial pressure, people often forget what is working in their lives. Health, skills, relationships, and past successes fade from awareness. This loss of perspective shrinks identity down to a single problem. Gratitude expands identity again. It reminds the person that they are more than their debt, more than their current numbers. From this expanded identity, creative solutions become possible. Another overlooked effect of gratitude is responsibility. True gratitude does not create passivity, it creates care. When people feel appreciative, they tend to protect what they have. They track spending more carefully, plan more thoughtfully, and act with intention. Panic, by contrast, leads to neglect and avoidance. A grateful mindset treats resources with respect, and respect is essential for financial stability. Gratitude also shifts expectations. Instead of demanding immediate rescue, the person becomes open to gradual improvement. This openness allows small wins to be recognized and built upon. A minor reduction in expenses, a slight increase in income, or a new idea is seen as progress instead of being dismissed as insufficient. Progress compounds when it is acknowledged. Gratitude fuels this compounding effect. Importantly, gratitude is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about recognizing what is real and supportive, even within difficulty. This honesty creates trust, both internally and externally. People respond differently to someone who is grounded and appreciative rather than frantic or resentful. Opportunities, assistance, and cooperation are more likely to arise in an atmosphere of trust. As gratitude deepens, fear loosens its grip. Fear tells the mind that there is never enough time, money, or support. Gratitude counters this by revealing moments of sufficiency, however small. These moments accumulate. Over time, the person begins to feel less chased by their circumstances and more capable of shaping them. The conclusion is that gratitude is not a reward for financial freedom. It is a pathway to it. By practicing gratitude through the psalm, the inner environment becomes calmer, clearer, and more receptive. Panic fades, decision-making improves, and respect for resources returns. In this state, money is no longer blocked by fear or chased by desperation. It finds a place where it can stay, grow, and serve its purpose. Gratitude does not erase debt overnight, but it removes the internal conditions that allow debt to dominate. When those conditions change, the external reality eventually follows. Silence is one of the most overlooked forces in personal and financial transformation. In a world filled with constant noise, advice, opinions, and internal chatter, silence can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. For someone under financial pressure, silence is often avoided because it leaves space for worry to surface. Yet it is precisely this space that allows true change to begin. The moment of silence after reading a psalm is not empty time, it is active integration. It is where words move from sound into understanding, and from understanding into behavior. When the mind is constantly stimulated, it has no opportunity to process. Thoughts stack on top of each other, emotions remain unresolved, and decisions are made reactively. Financial stress amplifies this condition. The brain becomes accustomed to urgency, and urgency becomes its default state. Silence interrupts this pattern. It signals that there is no immediate danger, no action required in this moment. This simple signal begins to calm the nervous system. A regulated nervous system is essential for clarity. When the body is calm, the mind can reflect instead of react. In silence, subtle realizations surface. A person may suddenly recognize a habit that drains money unnecessarily, or an option they dismissed too quickly. These insights rarely appear when the mind is loud. They arise in stillness, when the internal noise has settled enough to be heard. Silence also deepens sincerity. When a psalm is followed immediately by distraction, its impact is diluted. The words remain on the surface, never fully landing. Silence allows them to echo. It creates a container in which meaning can settle. This settling is what turns reading into transformation. Without it, the practice remains intellectual rather than experiential. Another important function of silence is emotional release. Financial stress often carries unexpressed fear, frustration, and shame. These emotions do not disappear when ignored. They accumulate. Silence gives them a brief moment to rise and pass without judgment. This release lightens the emotional load, making it easier to think clearly and act responsibly. Suppressed emotions distort financial behavior. Acknowledged emotions lose their power. Silence also restores intuition. Intuition is not mystical. It is the brain's ability to recognize patterns based on experience. Stress drowns it out. In silence, intuition becomes audible again. A person may sense which opportunities are aligned and which are not, even without logical certainty. This intuitive guidance is especially valuable when navigating financial decisions, where not everything can be calculated in advance. Another benefit of silence is patience. Stillness trains the mind to tolerate pauses without panic. This tolerance is crucial for financial recovery. Debt often creates a constant urge to act, even when waiting would be wiser. Silence strengthens the ability to pause, observe, and choose timing carefully. Good timing can save more money than hard work alone. Over time, the daily practice of silence builds self-trust. The person learns that they can sit with uncertainty without being overwhelmed by it. This confidence carries into daily life. Bills are faced instead of avoided. Plans are made instead of postponed. Responsibility feels manageable rather than crushing. Self-trust is a powerful stabilizer, and stability is what allows money to remain. Silence also improves focus. A focused mind is more productive, more efficient, and less prone to costly mistakes. Small improvements in focus compound quickly. Tasks are completed faster. Errors are reduced. Energy is conserved. These practical effects translate directly into financial benefit, even if indirectly. The conclusion is that silence is not passive. It is preparatory. It prepares the mind to receive insight, the heart to release fear, and the body to act with clarity. By honoring a moment of silence after the psalm, a person allows the practice to complete its work. This completion is what transforms intention into action. In a calm, quiet inner space, financial pressure begins to loosen, and the path forward becomes visible. Silence does not create money directly, but it creates the conditions in which money can return, stay, and grow. Money rarely returns in the way the mind expects, especially when that mind has been shaped by pressure, debt, and urgency. Most people imagine financial relief as a single dramatic event, a large payment, a sudden opportunity, or a breakthrough that instantly erases stress. This expectation narrows perception and quietly blocks the very paths through which money often re-enters life. One of the most important shifts that happens when inner alignment is restored is the ability to recognize that abundance moves through many channels, most of them subtle, indirect, and easily overlooked when fear is in control. When someone is under financial strain, their attention becomes rigid. They watch one door and ignore all others. If money does not come through that one expected opening, discouragement grows. This discouragement reinforces the belief that nothing is working, even when progress is happening in less obvious ways. The psalm softens this rigidity. It loosens the grip of expectation and allows awareness to widen. In that widened awareness, unexpected channels become visible. Money often returns first as clarity. A realization arrives about a recurring expense that can be eliminated without pain. A better way of managing existing resources becomes obvious. A habit that quietly drained finances is finally seen for what it is. These insights may not feel like money, but they are. Preventing loss is as powerful as gaining income, and sometimes more sustainable. Many people overlook this because it does not match their definition of abundance. Another channel is opportunity disguised as inconvenience. A delay forces reevaluation. A closed door pushes someone to explore a path they never considered. A difficult conversation reveals a truth that leads to better decisions. In a calm state, these moments are processed with openness instead of resistance. In a stressed state, they are dismissed or resented. Alignment changes interpretation, and interpretation changes outcome. Money also returns through people. A reconnection happens. Advice is offered at the right time. Support appears where none was expected. Pride and shame often prevent people in debt from recognizing or accepting help. The psalm reduces this shame, reminding the person that receiving is not weakness. When humility replaces fear, assistance becomes possible. Sometimes this assistance is financial, sometimes it is informational, and sometimes it is emotional. But all forms support stability. Another unexpected channel is skill recognition. Under pressure, people undervalue what they know and what they can do. Calm reflection brings these abilities back into focus. A skill that was once taken for granted becomes a source of income. A hobby turns into a service. Experience gained through hardship becomes valuable to others. These shifts rarely happen when the mind is frantic. They require space, patience, and self-respect. Money can also return through reduced burden, an obligation is renegotiated, a payment plan becomes manageable, a cost disappears entirely. Relief creates breathing room, and breathing room creates momentum. This momentum often leads to further improvements. Many people miss this because they are only watching for increases, not reductions. Yet, reduction is often the first sign that balance is being restored. Unexpected channels also include timing. Sometimes money does not arrive immediately because something must be learned or adjusted first. The psalm cultivates patience, allowing the process to unfold in the right order. When timing aligns, progress feels smoother and more sustainable. Forced solutions may provide temporary relief, but often recreate the same problems later. Aligned solutions build stability. As alignment deepens, confidence grows. This confidence affects posture, speech, and decision-making. Others respond differently to someone who is grounded rather than desperate. Trust increases, offers improve, negotiations shift. Confidence itself becomes a magnet for opportunity, yet it cannot be forced. It emerges naturally when fear subsides. Over time, these unexpected channels begin to connect. Insight leads to action. Action leads to relief. Relief leads to opportunity. Opportunity leads to growth. None of these steps alone may seem dramatic, but together they transform financial reality. The person realizes that money did return, just not in the narrow way they once demanded. The conclusion is this: abundance is not limited to one form or one path. When fear narrows perception, money appears scarce. When alignment restores calm, pathways multiply. By reading the psalm daily and releasing rigid expectations, a person allows these pathways to reveal themselves. Money returns as insight, relief, opportunity, support, and growth. In time, these forms converge into stability. What once felt blocked begins to move, not because it was forced, but because the conditions for its return were finally restored. Consistency is quiet, almost invisible, yet it is one of the most powerful forces in personal transformation. Most people underestimate it because it lacks drama. It does not create instant emotional highs or sudden breakthroughs. Instead, it works slowly, shaping habits, identity, and outcomes over time. When it comes to overcoming debt and restoring financial stability, consistency matters far more than intensity. Intensity burns quickly and leaves exhaustion behind. Consistency builds strength without drawing attention to itself. Many people approach financial stress with bursts of effort. One week they are highly motivated, praying constantly, tracking every expense, making big promises to themselves. The next week, discouragement sets in because results are not immediate. The effort collapses and the cycle repeats. This pattern mirrors inconsistency in the inner world. The psalm, read once a day, interrupts this cycle. It establishes a rhythm that can be maintained even on difficult days. Consistency creates trust. When a person shows up daily for a simple practice, they begin to trust themselves again. This self-trust is often damaged by debt, which creates a sense of failure or loss of control. Rebuilding trust starts with small, repeatable actions. Reading the psalm daily is one such action. It sends a message to the subconscious. I am reliable, I can commit, I can follow through. This message gradually reshapes identity. Identity is critical because people act in alignment with who they believe they are. Someone who sees themselves as unstable will make unstable financial choices. Someone who sees themselves as disciplined will act differently, even under pressure. Consistency transforms identity quietly. Without force or struggle, the person begins to think and behave like someone who is regaining control. Consistency also reduces emotional volatility. Financial stress often causes mood swings. Hope one day, despair the next. These swings affect decision-making. Calm, consistent practices stabilize emotions. When emotions are stable, choices improve. improved choices compound over time, creating tangible results. This compounding effect is rarely noticed in the beginning, but it is powerful. Another benefit of consistency is patience. By committing to a daily practice without expecting immediate results, the person trains themselves to tolerate delayed gratification. This skill is essential for financial health. Many debt-related problems stem from impatience. Bending to feel better now, borrowing to solve today's discomfort. Patience allows long-term solutions to replace short-term fixes. Consistency also creates momentum. Each day builds on the last. Missed days are noticed, not with guilt, but with awareness. The practice becomes part of life rather than a reaction to crisis. This integration makes it sustainable. Sustainable practices outlast temporary motivation, and outlasting is what ultimately changes outcomes. Over time, consistency reveals patterns. The person notices what improves when they remain steady and what deteriorates when they do not. This awareness leads to refinement. The practice becomes more meaningful, not because it changes, but because the person changes. They bring more presence, more understanding, and more sincerity to it. The cumulative effect of consistency is confidence. Not loud confidence, but quiet assurance. This assurance influences interactions, planning, and risk assessment. It reduces impulsivity and increases follow-through. These traits are essential for rebuilding finances and maintaining stability once it is achieved. The conclusion is that consistency transforms without force. By reading the Psalm once a day, steadily and sincerely, a person creates a foundation that intensity alone cannot provide. Over time, this foundation supports better choices, stronger identity, and lasting change. Debt loses its hold not through dramatic effort, but through quiet, repeated alignment. When consistency becomes the norm, stability follows naturally, and financial freedom becomes not a distant hope, but a predictable outcome of steady practice.